The mare's eyes rolled white with terror as she went down in the straw, her distended belly heaving with contractions that promised death instead of life. And Wendy Lawson knew she had perhaps 20 minutes to save both mother and foal before the ranch lost everything. She had arrived in Red Cloud, Nebraska just 3 weeks prior in the spring of 1884, answering an advertisement for a housekeeper at the Xerxes Ranch. The position promised room, board, and modest wages, which was more than most women could hope for in these parts. Wendy had traveled from Ohio after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. At 22 years old, she possessed a quick mind, strong hands, and a stubborn determination that had seen her through harder times than most men twice her age could claim. The Xerxes Ranch sprawled across 2,000 acres of Nebraska grassland, running cattle and breeding some of the finest quarter horses west of the Mississippi. Kellan Xerxes, the owner, was 28 and had inherited the spread from his father just 2 years earlier. He ran the operation with the kind of intensity that came from knowing every animal, every acre, every dollar mattered. His hands bore the calluses of hard work, his face showed the weathering of sun and wind, and his dark eyes carried the weight of responsibility that never quite lifted. Wendy had learned quickly that keeping house for a working ranch meant more than cooking and cleaning. It meant understanding the rhythm of the land, the urgency of the seasons, the crisis that could erupt at any moment. She had grown up on a small farm before her father lost everything to bad loans and worse luck. So the sight of livestock and the smell of hay felt like home in a way the city never had. Now she stood in the foaling barn, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the mare struggle. Kellan knelt beside the horse, his jaw tight with worry. The other ranch hands, 4 weathered men who had been with the Xerxes family for decades, clustered near the door with grim expressions. "Someone needs to ride for Doc Patterson," Kellan said, his voice rough. "This is beyond me." "Already tried, boss," said Marcus, the foreman. "His wife says he left 2 days ago to tend a sick cow up at the Henderson place, 30 miles north. Storm washed out the bridge. He cannot get back until they repair it." Kellan swore under his breath. "What about that new veterinarian in Hastings?" "Sent someone. He refuses to come. Says he is not risking his neck for a horse when there is a fever going through the cattle up that way. He needs to stay close." The mare screamed, a sound that tore through the barn like a physical thing. Her sides heaved, and Wendy could see the problem immediately. The foal was positioned wrong. She had seen this before, back when her father still had their small farm. She had been 14 when their best milk cow went into labor with a breech calf. The veterinarian had been drunk, useless, so her father had talked her through the process, his voice calm and steady even as his hands shook. Together they had turned that calf and brought it into the world alive. Her father had been a lot of things, most of them disappointing, but he had known animals. He had taught her that sometimes you had to trust your instincts and your knowledge more than your fear. "I can do it," Wendy heard herself say. Every head turned toward her. Kellan's eyes widened. "What?" "I can turn the foal. I have done it before with cattle. The principle is the same." She moved forward, already rolling up her sleeves. Her hands were trembling, but her voice came out steady. "If we do nothing, they both die. If I try and fail, they die. But if I try and succeed, you save your mare and foal both." Kellan stared at her for a long moment. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, desperation fighting with doubt, fear fighting with hope. The mare groaned again, her breathing labored. "Tell me what you need," he said. Wendy's mind clicked into focus. "Hot water, soap, clean towels. I need rope, soft rope, nothing rough that will tear. And I need everyone except you out of this barn. She is already terrified. The fewer people, the better." Marcus and the other hands looked at Kellan, who nodded sharply. They filed out, though she could see the skepticism written across their weathered faces. A woman birthing a foal. She was a housekeeper, for God's sake, but Wendy had no time to care what they thought. She scrubbed her hands and arms with the harsh lye soap until her skin turned red, then knelt beside the mare. The animal's eye rolled toward her, wild and pleading. "Easy, girl," Wendy murmured, placing a gentle hand on the horse's neck. "We are going to help you, I promise." Kellan positioned himself at the mare's head, stroking her face and speaking in low, soothing tones. Wendy examined the situation carefully. One foreleg was presenting, but the other was folded back. The foal's head was turned to the side. Without intervention, the birth would be impossible. "I need to push the foal back in and reposition it," Wendy explained, keeping her voice calm despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. "It is going to hurt her. She is going to fight. You need to keep her as calm as possible." "I understand." Kellan's face was pale but determined. Wendy waited for the contraction to pass, then carefully reached inside the mare. The heat was overwhelming, the pressure immense. She found the foal's folded leg and began to work it forward, her movements slow and deliberate despite the urgency pounding in her chest. The mare thrashed, and Kellan held her head, his voice never stopping its steady stream of reassurance. Sweat poured down Wendy's face. Her shoulders ached. Her arm felt crushed by the pressure of the birth canal. But she kept working, kept adjusting, kept pushing against every instinct that screamed she was hurting this animal. Sometimes helping meant causing pain first. She found the foal's head and carefully guided it into position. The second leg proved stubborn, tucked up tight against the foal's body. Wendy had to push the entire foal back farther, giving herself room to work. The mare screamed again, and Wendy's heart broke for her, but she did not stop. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, baby, help me here." And then, like a miracle, the legs straightened. Wendy guided both forelegs into position, the head tucked between them just as it should be. She withdrew her arm carefully and grabbed the soft rope, looping it around the foal's legs. "Next contraction, I am going to pull," she told Kellan. "Steady, even pressure." He nodded, his face tight with concentration. The mare's sides heaved. Wendy pulled firm and smooth, working with the contraction instead of against it. The foal began to emerge, first the nose, then the head, then the shoulders. Another contraction, another steady pull, and suddenly the foal slid free in a rush of fluid and membrane. Wendy fell backward, gasping. The foal lay still in the straw, covered in its birthing sac. No, they had not come this far to lose it now. She scrambled forward and tore away the membrane from its face, clearing its nostrils and mouth. She grabbed a handful of straw and rubbed the foal's sides vigorously, stimulating its breathing. "Come on," she said fiercely. "Breathe, breathe." For one terrible, endless moment, nothing happened. Then the foal's sides expanded and it drew in a shuddering breath. Another. Its eyes opened, dark and wondering. Wendy sat back on her heels, her entire body shaking. The mare lifted her head, nickering softly, and turned to sniff her baby. The foal was a filly, dark bay with a white star on her forehead. Perfect. Alive. Kellan made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You did it. Dear God, you actually did it." Wendy looked at him and found tears streaming down his face. He did not bother to hide them or wipe them away. His hands were shaking as he continued to stroke the mare's neck. "You saved them both," he said, his voice breaking. "You saved my whole herd." Wendy did not understand what he meant until later, after the mare was on her feet and the foal was nursing. When Kellan explained that this mare was the foundation of his breeding program. She carried the bloodlines of champions, and this foal had been promised to a buyer in Kansas City, for a sum that would pay the ranch's debts and secure its future for another year. Without this berth, without this foal, the Xerxes Ranch would have faced financial ruin. "I was betting everything on her," Kellan admitted. They stood outside the barn in the cool spring evening, watching the stars emerge overhead. "My father made some investments before he died. Bad ones. I have been working to dig us out ever since. This foal represents survival." Wendy looked at him in the fading light. Truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time since she had arrived. She saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the tension he carried in his shoulders, the way his hands were never quite still. She saw a man carrying the weight of generations, determined not to be the one who lost it all. "You will make it," she said quietly. "I know you will." He met her eyes and something passed between them, something that made her breath catch. "I believe you," he said. "After tonight, I would believe just about anything you told me." Inside the barn, the filly nickered, and they both smiled. The days that followed brought a shift in the rhythm of the ranch. Word spread quickly about what Wendy had done, and the hands who had been skeptical now tipped their hats when she passed. Marcus sought her opinion on a cow that was off her feed, and she correctly diagnosed a bad tooth. When one of the hands took a fall and dislocated his shoulder, it was Wendy who popped it back into place with a quick, sure motion that left the man gasping with relief. "You are full of surprises," Kellan said one morning as she served breakfast. The ranch house was large but not fancy, built for function rather than show. The kitchen where she worked was warm and bright, with windows that looked out over the eastern pastures. "I learned a lot growing up," Wendy said, pouring coffee. "My father believed in being useful. He said if you could not fix something or birth something or build something, you had no business taking up space in the world." He sounds like a practical man. He was. She did not mention how her father's practicality had not extended to managing money, or how his useful skills had not saved him from the bottle that eventually killed him. Some stories were better left untold. Kellan studied her over his coffee cup. "You said you came from Ohio. Do you have family there still?" "No. My mother died when I was young. My father passed last winter. I have a brother somewhere, but we lost touch years ago." She wiped her hands on her apron. "The ranch is my family now, I suppose." Something flickered in Kellan's eyes, but he only nodded and returned to his breakfast. Wendy busied herself with the dishes, trying to ignore the way her heart had stuttered when he looked at her. It was foolishness, she told herself. She was the housekeeper. He was the owner. That was all there was to it. But as the weeks passed, she found herself looking for him in the mornings, listening for his step on the porch. She learned his habits, his preferences. She discovered he liked his coffee strong enough to dissolve horseshoes, that he had a weakness for apple pie, that he read by lamplight in the evenings when the work was finally done. Books on animal husbandry, mostly, but also poetry. She had been surprised by that until she remembered that educated men were not uncommon out here. The West attracted all kinds. One evening in late May, a rider came thundering up to the ranch house, his horse lathered with sweat. Wendy was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard the commotion. She wiped her hands and stepped out onto the porch. "Boss," the rider shouted. He was young, barely 20, and his face was pale with panic. "It is the cattle. Something is wrong. They are dropping in the north pasture." Kellan was out of the barn in seconds, Marcus at his heels. "How many?" "3 down when I left. Others looking sick. I do not know what it is." Kellan swore and started barking orders. Within minutes, he and 4 hands were mounted and ready to ride. Wendy found herself moving before she thought about it, grabbing her shawl from inside. "I am coming with you," she called. Kellan turned in his saddle. "Wendy, You do not need to. If it is poison or disease, I might be able to help. And if it is something else, another pair of eyes cannot hurt." She met his gaze steadily. "Please." He hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Marcus, get her a horse." 5 minutes later, Wendy was mounted on a steady gelding and they were racing across the prairie. The evening sun painted the grassland gold and amber, beautiful despite the crisis. They rode hard for 20 minutes before reaching the north pasture, where the horror of the situation became immediately clear. 6 cattle were down, lying on their sides with labored breathing. Another dozen stood with their heads low, stumbling when they tried to move. The rest of the herd had scattered to the far edge of the pasture, their survival instincts driving them away from whatever was killing their companions. Kellan dismounted and approached the nearest downed cow. Wendy followed, her mind racing through possibilities. Not plague, or more would be sick. Not injury, or the symptoms would be different. That left poison or snake bite, but this many animals all at once suggested something they had all ingested. She walked among the sick cattle, looking at their eyes, their mouths, the way they moved. Then she saw it. White foam at the corners of their mouths, trembling muscles, dilated pupils. "Poison," she said sharply. "Look at their symptoms. Foam, tremors, pupils blown wide. They ate something toxic." "What kind of poison?" Kellan demanded. Wendy scanned the pasture. The grass was thick and green, but there, near where the sick cattle had been grouped, she saw a patch of distinctive plants with compound leaves and small white flowers. Her father had warned her about them years ago. "Water hemlock," she said, pointing. "See those plants? They must have gotten into the roots. The ground is soft here from rain. If the plants got uprooted and the cattle ate the roots, they would be poisoned within hours." "Can we save them?" Kellan's voice was tight. "I do not know. There is no antidote for water hemlock. But we can try to dilute the poison, give their bodies time to process it." She turned to Marcus. "We need cooking oil, lots of it. Activated charcoal if you have any, and we need to get fluids into them." "The house is too far," Marcus said. "By the time we ride back, the line shack," one of the other hands interrupted. "There is one just over that ridge. We keep supplies there." "Go," Kellan ordered. "Take 2 men and bring back everything you can carry that might help. The rest of us stay here and keep these cattle alive." The next several hours were a nightmare of exhaustion and desperation. They forced oil down the throats of the sick cattle, trying to bind the poison in their guts. They hauled water from a nearby creek, coaxing the animals to drink. Wendy moved from cow to cow, checking their breathing, their heart rates, their pupils. 3 more went down as they worked, and she knew they were fighting a losing battle for some of them. "This one is fading," she called to Kellan. "Her heart rate is dropping. I do not think she is going to make it." He appeared at her side, his face grim. They watched together as the cow's breathing slowed, then stopped. Kellan closed his eyes, his jaw working. $400, he said quietly. "That is what she was worth. $400 I do not have to lose." Wendy wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, but she did not know if she had the right. Instead, she stood and moved to the next animal. "These 3 are stabilizing," she said. "I think they might pull through the long night they worked." The temperature dropped, and Wendy wrapped her shawl tighter, but she did not stop moving. Kellan was everywhere, his energy seemingly inexhaustible, his attention on every detail. She watched him comfort a struggling heifer, watched him make the hard decision to put down a steer that was suffering too much, watched him thank each of his men for their efforts. This was what leadership looked like, she thought. Not just giving orders, but being present in the hardest moments, sharing the burden instead of standing apart from it. By dawn, they had lost 4 animals. 9 others were recovering, their symptoms easing as their bodies processed and eliminated the poison. The crisis had passed. Kellan stood at the fence line, staring out at the herd as the sun rose. Wendy approached him slowly, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. One of the ranch hands had brought them from the line shack, strong and bitter but hot. "Here," she said, offering him a cup. He took it with a nod of thanks. 4 dead. That is $1,600, plus whatever the others lose in condition before they recover. He took a long swallow of coffee. "I cannot afford losses like this." "But you did not lose them all. Without quick action, you might have lost the entire herd in this pasture." 40 head, maybe more. Wendy sipped her own coffee, the heat chasing away some of the chill. "You saved most of them. That has to count for something." "We saved them," Kellan corrected, looking at her. "You identified the poison. You knew what to do without you." He trailed off, shaking his head. The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the prairie with golden light. In that moment, with exhaustion and relief making her brave, Wendy said what she had been thinking for weeks. "I am glad I came here. To Red Cloud. To your ranch. I know I am just the housekeeper, but this feels like the first place I have belonged since my father's farm." Kellan turned to face her fully. "You are not just the housekeeper. Not anymore. Maybe not ever really, but definitely not after the last month." He set down his coffee cup and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign he was gathering his thoughts. "Wendy, I need to be honest with you about something." Her heart began to pound. "All right. When I hired you, I needed someone to keep the house. That was all I was looking for. Someone to cook and clean and manage the household so I could focus on the ranch." He met her eyes. "But you have become essential to this operation in ways I never anticipated. You have skills I need, knowledge I do not have. And I find myself relying on you for more than just meals and laundry." "I am happy to help," Wendy said carefully, not sure where this was going. "I want to offer you a partnership," Kellan said. "Not as a hired hand, but as a true partner in running this ranch. You would have a say in decisions, a share in profits. Your name would be on the papers alongside mine." Wendy stared at him, shocked. "Kellan, I have only been here a month. I do not know the first thing about running a business. But you know animals, you know medicine. You have instincts I trust." He stepped closer. "And if I am being completely honest, which I am trying to be, there is another reason I am asking." Her breath caught. "What reason?" "I have feelings for you." The words came out rough, almost reluctant, as if he had been fighting them and finally lost. "I know it is too soon. I know there is a difference in our positions that makes this complicated, but I cannot stop thinking about you, Wendy. I cannot stop watching for you in the mornings or listening for your voice. And I thought, if I am going to be a fool anyway, I might as well be an honest fool." The prairie stretched out around them, vast and wild and beautiful. Somewhere a meadowlark sang its morning song. Wendy felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet, as if the world had rearranged itself in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "I have feelings for you too," she heard herself say. "I did not know if I should. I did not know if it was appropriate or wise or even possible. But I do." Kellan's face transformed, hope chasing away the exhaustion and worry. "Then maybe we can figure out the rest as we go." "Maybe we can," Wendy agreed, and when he smiled, she felt something in her chest unfold like a flower opening to the sun. He did not kiss her then, not with the ranch hands watching from across the pasture, but he took her hand and held it, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The partnership papers were drawn up 2 weeks later when the lawyer came through Red Cloud. Wendy signed her name carefully, the ink dark against the cream paper. Wendy Lawson, partner in the Xerxes Ranch. It felt surreal and right at the same time. Marcus and the other hands took the news with good grace, though she suspected Kellan had discussed it with them beforehand. "About time this place had a woman's touch in more than just the kitchen," Marcus said, tipping his hat to her. "And after what you did with that mare and the poisoned cattle, I would follow your lead any day." The other hands nodded agreement. Wendy felt a rush of gratitude for these weathered men who accepted her not because she was a woman trying to do a man's job, but because she had proven herself capable of doing the job that needed doing. But not everyone in Red Cloud was as accepting. When Wendy went into town the following Saturday for supplies, she felt the weight of stares and whispers. Women in particular seemed scandalized by the news that had spread through the small community. A female partner in a ranch, living under the same roof as an unmarried man. It was improper, they said. It was scandalous. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, stopped Wendy on the street outside the general store. "Miss Lawson, I feel it is my Christian duty to warn you that you are putting your reputation at risk with this arrangement." Wendy met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Henderson, but my reputation can withstand honesty and hard work. I am a partner in a business, nothing more." "Nothing more?" Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. "You live in his house. You are not married. People will talk." "People always talk," Wendy said. "I learned long ago that I cannot control what others say about me. I can only control my own actions and know my own truth." She moved past the woman into the store, her head high, but inside, her stomach churned. She had not considered how the town would react. She had been so focused on the ranch, on the work, on her growing feelings for Kellan, that she had not thought about the social implications. That evening, she brought it up with Kellan as they sat on the porch after supper. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of grass, and fireflies danced in the dusk. "I made things difficult for you in town today," she said, explaining what had happened with Mrs. Henderson and others. Kellan's jaw tightened. "They have no right to judge you. They have every right. This is a small town, people notice, and they are not entirely wrong. My living here while we are unmarried does look improper, even if our intentions are honest." "So what are you saying?" Kellan's voice was carefully neutral. "Do you want to leave?" "No," Wendy said immediately. "I do not want to leave. This is my home now, but I think we need to make a decision about what we are to each other." Kellan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and intense. "I want to court you properly. I want to take you to dances and socials. I want everyone to know that my intentions are honorable and serious. And when enough time has passed that no one can say we rushed, I want to marry you." Wendy's heart felt too large for her chest. "How much time is enough?" "As long as you need," Kellan said. "I am not going anywhere. The ranch is here. I am here. Take whatever time you need to be sure." She looked at him in the gathering darkness, this man who had somehow become the center of her world in just 2 months. She thought about what it meant to be sure. She thought about her father, who had made rash decisions and paid for them. She thought about the importance of building something solid and true. 6 months, she said. "Give me 6 months to learn the ranch, to prove to this town and to ourselves that I am here for more than just you. Then we can talk about marriage." Kellan extended his hand and she took it. 6 months, he agreed, "but I am still courting you." He was true to his word. Despite the demands of the ranch, Kellan made time to take Wendy into town for the Saturday night socials. They attended the church picnic in June, where she made her famous apple pie and he won the horseshoe tournament. They went to the 4th of July celebration, where they watched fireworks burst over the prairie, and he held her hand in the darkness. The courting was proper and public, designed to show the town that their relationship was respectable. But it was also genuine. Wendy fell in love with Kellan not just as a partner or a potential husband, but as a person. She loved his dedication to the ranch and his animals. She loved the way he treated his men with respect and fairness. She loved his dry humor that emerged in unexpected moments. She loved how he read poetry by lamplight and was not ashamed to cry when an animal died. She loved him, completely and without reservation, and he loved her. She could see it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She could feel it in the gentle touches, the brush of his hand against her arm, the way he steadied her when she stumbled. She could hear it in his voice when he said her name. The ranch thrived under their partnership. Wendy implemented new methods for tracking the health of the herd, keeping detailed records that helped them identify problems early. When a buyer came through looking for breeding stock, it was Wendy who negotiated the price, getting 15% more than Kellan had initially asked. The filly born that desperate night in April grew into a strong, healthy foal, and when the buyer from Kansas City came to claim her in August, he paid the full price plus a bonus for her excellent condition. "You were right," Kellan told Wendy that night as they reviewed the ranch's accounts. "We are going to make it. The debts will be paid by year's end." Wendy looked at the neat columns of numbers, the black ink finally overtaking the red. "We did this together." "We did," Kellan agreed. He reached across the desk and took her hand. "Wendy, it has been 4 months. I know I promised you 6, but I need to ask you something." Her heart began to race. "What? Are you happy here? Not just content or satisfied, but truly happy?" She thought about the question, giving it the weight it deserved. "I am happier than I have ever been. This place, this life, it is everything I did not know I wanted." "Then marry me," Kellan said. "Not in 2 months when the arbitrary time period is up. Marry me now. Marry me because we have already built a life together, because we have already proven to ourselves and everyone else that what we have is real. Marry me because I love you and cannot imagine my future without you in it." Wendy felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." He came around the desk and pulled her into his arms, and finally, after months of restraint and propriety, he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and hungry, months of longing compressed into a single moment. Wendy kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body pressed against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kellan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the night you saved that foal. I have wanted you to do that since the first time you smiled at me," Wendy admitted. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Red Cloud. Marcus stood up as Kellan's best man, and the general store owner's daughter, one of the few women in town who had been kind to Wendy, served as her bridesmaid. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Kellan kissed her in front of God and the community, Wendy felt as if her life was finally beginning in earnest. The ranch hands threw a party at the main house that lasted well into the night. There was music and dancing, food and whiskey. Marcus gave a toast that made everyone laugh and then tear up. Kellan waltzed Wendy around the porch under the stars while someone played a fiddle, and she had never felt so cherished. Later, in the privacy of the bedroom they now shared, Kellan made love to her with a tenderness that took her breath away. He touched her as if she were precious, as if she were something rare and valuable that he could not quite believe was his. Wendy gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back, and found in his arms a joy she had not known existed. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. A drought in September threatened the water supply, but Wendy remembered a spring her father had mentioned that existed on land adjacent to their property. They negotiated a deal with the neighbor to share the water, and both ranches survived. In October, a prairie fire came within a mile of their buildings before a fortuitous rain put it out. In November, 3 hands quit to try their luck in the gold fields, and Kellan and Wendy had to work twice as hard to make up for the lost labor. But there were good times too. The sale of cattle in December brought enough profit to pay off the last of the ranch's debts and still have money left over for improvements. They bought new equipment and hired 2 new hands. Christmas was a small affair, just the 2 of them, but Kellan gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal for keeping ranch records, and she gave him a new saddle she had saved for months to afford. In January, Wendy realized her monthly courses had not come. At first, she attributed it to stress or the hard physical work, but when a second month passed and she began feeling nauseous in the mornings, she could not deny the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal parts. She had seen too many women die in childbirth, too many babies lost. The frontier was not kind to mothers and infants, but she also felt a fierce excitement, a desire to meet this child they had created, to hold their baby in her arms. She told Kellan one evening in February as they sat by the fire. He was reading a farming journal and she was mending a shirt. The domesticity of the moment felt right for such an announcement. "Kellan, I have something to tell you." He looked up, his expression immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby." She watched his face, looking for his reaction. "In August, I think." For a moment he did not move. Then he set down his journal very carefully as if afraid he might drop it. "A baby," he repeated. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She felt him shaking and realized he was crying. "Kellan," she said softly. "I am happy," he said, his voice muffled. "I am so damn happy I do not have words for it." She held him, this strong man who was not afraid to show his emotions, and felt her own tears fall. They stood there together, wrapped in each other's arms, thinking about the future they were creating. The pregnancy was not easy. Wendy continued working through the nausea and exhaustion, determined not to let the ranch suffer. But as her belly grew, she had to accept certain limitations. She could no longer help with the spring branding. She could not ride out to check on distant herds. Her body was changing, becoming something both strange and miraculous. Kellan was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He did not want her lifting anything heavy or working too hard. He brought her water constantly, worried she was not drinking enough. He read every book on pregnancy and childbirth he could find, which mostly served to terrify him with lists of everything that could go wrong. "You need to stop reading those," Wendy told him one night in May. "You are going to worry yourself to death." "I just want to be prepared," Kellan said. "I want to know what to do if something goes wrong." Wendy took his hand and placed it on her swollen belly. "Feel that. That is your child, strong and healthy, kicking me in the ribs. Everything is going to be fine." As if in response, the baby kicked hard against his palm. Kellan's face lit up with wonder. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father. I cannot wait to meet you." In June, they began preparing the nursery. One of the smaller bedrooms was cleaned and painted. Wendy sewed tiny clothes from soft fabric, her hands moving with practiced skill. Kellan built a cradle from cherry wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. They did not know if the baby would be a boy or a girl, so they chose yellow and white for the colors. The baby came on a sweltering night in late August. Wendy's water broke just after supper, and the contractions started within the hour. They had arranged for the midwife from town to be present, and Kellan sent Marcus riding hard to fetch her. But the baby had its own timeline. The contractions came fast and hard, leaving Wendy gasping with their intensity. By the time the midwife arrived, Wendy was already pushing. "Good Lord, this one is in a hurry," the midwife said, a weathered woman named Ruth who had delivered half the babies in the county. "All right, Wendy. You know what to do. Listen to your body." Kellan stayed by her side, holding her hand, letting her squeeze until his fingers went numb. She had seen him face down angry cattle and financial ruin without flinching, but now his face was pale with fear for her. "I am all right," she panted between contractions. "I am strong. I can do this." "I know you can," Kellan said. "You are the strongest person I know." The birth was hard but quick. Less than 3 hours after the first contraction, their son came into the world with a loud, healthy cry. Ruth cleaned him and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Wendy's arms. "A boy," Wendy whispered, looking down at the tiny face. "We have a son." Kellan stared at the baby with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect." "He is," Ruth agreed. 8 pounds if he is an ounce, and with a good set of lungs. "You did well, Wendy." They named him Kyle after Kellan's father and Reed after Wendy's. Kyle Reed Xerxes, born August 23, 1885. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes, and from the moment Wendy held him, she loved him with a ferocity that surprised her. Kellan was a devoted father from the start. He changed diapers and walked the floor with Kyle when he fussed. He sang lullabies in a low, rumbling voice that made the baby stop crying and listen. He showed Kyle off to the ranch hands with undisguised pride. "Boss has gone soft," Marcus said to Wendy one day, watching Kellan coo at the baby, but he was smiling as he said it. "Fatherhood agrees with him," Wendy said. "Suits you both," Marcus agreed. "This ranch needed a family at its heart. It is good to hear a baby crying again. Reminds us all what we are working for." Wendy settled into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She nursed Kyle and cared for him, but she also continued to work with the ranch accounts and make decisions about breeding and sales. The ranch was not just Kellan's anymore, or even just theirs as a couple. It was Kyle's inheritance, and she would make sure it was thriving when he was old enough to take it over. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Kyle learned to walk and talk, becoming a curious toddler who wanted to be wherever his parents were. When he was 2, Wendy discovered she was pregnant again. Their second son, Kenneth, was born in the spring of 1888, an easier birth than the first. 2 years later came their daughter, Willow, who had Wendy's stubbornness and Kellan's dark eyes. The ranch grew along with their family. They expanded their holdings, buying adjacent land when it became available. They built new barns and corrals. They earned a reputation for quality breeding stock, and buyers came from as far as Kansas City and Denver to purchase their horses and cattle. Wendy became known throughout the region as a woman with a gift for healing animals. Ranchers would send for her when a valuable animal was sick or injured, and she rarely failed to help. She trained Kyle and Kenneth in what she knew, teaching them to read an animal's symptoms, to stay calm in a crisis, to trust their instincts. Kellan thrived as a husband, father, and rancher. The worry that had lined his face when Wendy first met him gradually eased as the ranch became more secure. He laughed more, played with his children, made time to take Wendy dancing on Saturday nights when they could get away. He never stopped courting her, never stopped showing her that she was loved and valued. One evening in 1895, 11 years after that desperate night when Wendy first saved the mare and foal, they sat on the porch together watching their children play in the yard. Kyle was 10 now, already tall and responsible, helping with the ranch work. Kenneth was 7, more interested in books than cattle but learning nonetheless. Willow was 5, fearless and bright, following her brothers everywhere. "Do you ever regret it?" Kellan asked suddenly. "Answering that advertisement, coming here, tying yourself to this life." Wendy looked at him in surprise. "Regret? No, never. Why would you ask that? I just think about that night sometimes. The night you saved the mare. If you had failed, if they had died, would you have stayed? Or would you have moved on to something else, somewhere else?" Wendy considered the question. "I do not know," she admitted. "But they did not die. I succeeded. And every choice after that led me here to this moment with you and our children and this life we built. I cannot regret any of it." Kellan took her hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "You saved more than my herd that night. You saved me. I was drowning in debt and worry, and I could not see a way forward. Then you arrived, and suddenly everything changed. We saved each other," Wendy said. "You gave me a home when I had nothing. You saw value in me when most people just saw a woman looking for work. You loved me when I did not think anyone would." In the yard, Kyle called out to his siblings, organizing them for some game. Kenneth was arguing about the rules while Willow ignored them both and ran off on her own adventure. It was chaos and noise and joy, everything a family should be. "I wonder what they will do," Kellan mused. "Kyle will take over the ranch someday, I suppose. But Kenneth and Willow, they will find their own paths. We will support them in whatever they choose," Wendy said. "That is what parents do." As the sun set over the Nebraska prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Wendy reflected on the unlikely chain of events that had brought her here. A desperate mare, a missing veterinarian, her own courage in stepping forward when she was needed most. That single night had set everything else in motion. She thought about the young woman she had been, arriving in Red Cloud with nothing but a carpetbag and hope. She thought about how terrified she had been reaching inside that laboring mare, how her hands had shaken even as she worked with steady determination. She thought about Kellan's face when the foal finally breathed, the tears streaming down his cheeks, his broken voice saying, "You saved my whole herd." He had not just meant the mare and foal. He had meant everything: the ranch, the future, the hope that had been slipping through his fingers. She had given him a chance to keep building, to keep trying to succeed. And in doing so, she had saved herself too. 2 more children came in the years that followed. Another daughter, Winnie, in 1897, and a final son, Kevin, in 1899. The ranch house expanded to accommodate the growing family, with new bedrooms added and the kitchen enlarged. The noise and chaos of 5 children filled every corner, but Wendy would not have had it any other way. Kyle grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. By 16, he was managing entire sections of the operation on his own. Kenneth discovered a talent for numbers and began keeping the ranch accounts, his meticulous records helping them maximize profits and minimize waste. Willow, to everyone's surprise, showed a gift for training horses. She could gentle the most stubborn colt with patience and soft words. The younger children were still finding their paths, but Winnie seemed drawn to healing like her mother, always wanting to help when an animal was sick. Kevin, at just 6 years old, was still more interested in playing than working, but he showed signs of his father's intensity and his mother's determination. In the summer of 1905, 21 years after Wendy first arrived at the Xerxes Ranch, they threw a celebration for the ranch's 50th anniversary. Kellan's father had established it in 1855, and it had survived everything the frontier could throw at it: droughts, fires, economic crashes, harsh winters, and dangerous summers. People came from all over the county to celebrate. There was music and dancing, food and drink, stories and laughter. Marcus, now in his 60s and officially retired, though he still came around to offer advice, gave a toast that brought tears to many eyes. "I have been with this ranch for 40 years," he said, raising his glass. "I watched Kellan's father build it from nothing. I watched Kellan nearly lose it and then save it. And I watched Wendy come along and turn it into something more than any of us dreamed possible. To the Xerxes family, and to the next 50 years, everyone cheered and drank." Wendy looked around at the crowd, neighbors and friends, ranch hands past and present, townspeople who had once been skeptical but were now supporters. She saw her children laughing with friends, saw Kellan talking with other ranchers, saw the community they had become part of. Late that night, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Wendy and Kellan walked out to the barn where it had all begun. The mare from that desperate night was long dead, but her daughter, the filly Wendy had saved, was still there, now an old lady herself at 21. Her own daughters and granddaughters populated the ranch's breeding program, her bloodline strong and true. "Hello, girl," Wendy murmured, stroking the old mare's nose. "Do you remember that night? The night you came into the world and changed everything?" The mare nickered softly, her breath warm against Wendy's hand. Kellan wrapped his arms around Wendy from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "I love you," he said. "I know I tell you that all the time, but I want to make sure you know. Everything good in my life comes back to you." Wendy turned in his arms to face him. They had both aged. There was silver in Kellan's dark hair now, lines around Wendy's eyes, but the love between them had only deepened. It was a well-worn, comfortable love, but it was also still passionate, still intense. They had built it day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment over 21 years. "I love you too," she said. "You and our children and this ranch and this life, all of it." They stood there in the barn, holding each other as they had held each other through crisis and triumph, through births and deaths, through every challenge the years had brought. The ranch was quiet around them, the animals settled for the night, the land peaceful under the stars. Wendy thought about destiny and choice, about luck and determination. She thought about how a single moment could change everything, how reaching out to help when help was needed could set in motion events that shaped entire lives. She thought about courage and love, and the strength it took to build something lasting. She had come to Red Cloud with nothing. She had saved a dying mare because it needed saving, and she had the skill to do it. And that single act of competence and courage had earned her a partner's respect, then his love, then a life beyond anything she could have imagined. "You saved my whole herd," Kellan had said that night, but the truth was more complicated and more beautiful than that. They had saved each other, and in doing so, they had created something neither could have built alone. A family, a legacy, a love that would outlast them both. The old mare shifted in her stall, content and comfortable in her retirement. The barn smelled of hay and horses, familiar and homey. Outside, the Nebraska prairie stretched into darkness, vast and wild and beautiful, just as it had been 21 years ago. And inside the barn, Kellan and Wendy held each other and looked toward a future that was bright with promise, built on a foundation of shared struggle and triumph, of respect and passion, of the kind of love that only comes from truly knowing another person and choosing them anyway, every single day. Their children would grow and have families of their own. The ranch would continue to thrive and expand. The bloodline of that desperate foal born on a spring night in 1884 would spread through breeding programs across the West. And through it all, the story would be told of the woman who could birth a calf when the vet refused, and the cowboy who recognized her worth. But those were the bare facts, the skeleton of the tale. The truth was in the details, in the way Wendy's hands had shaken as she worked to save that mare, in the tears on Kellan's face when the foal finally breathed, in the thousands of small moments that followed. The morning coffee shared in comfortable silence. The way they made decisions together, valuing each other's input. The laughter of their children. The satisfaction of watching the ranch thrive under their partnership. Love was not just one dramatic moment, Wendy had learned. It was all the quiet moments after, the choice to keep showing up, keep working, keep caring. It was partnership and passion, friendship and respect, all woven together into something stronger than any single thread. As they walked back to the house together, hand in hand under the stars, Wendy felt complete. She had found her place in the world, not because someone had given it to her, but because she had earned it through skill and courage and determination. She had found love, not because she had gone looking for it, but because she had been open to it when it appeared. The house glowed with lamplight in the distance. Inside, their children slept safely. The ranch surrounded them, solid and real, built on their combined efforts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always challenges on a frontier ranch, but they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. Kellan squeezed her hand as they reached the porch. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am," Wendy said. "About how a single night changed my entire life." "Lucky," Kellan repeated thoughtfully. "Maybe, but luck had help. You made your own fortune, Wendy. You reached out when you could have stayed silent. You risked failure to try for success. That was not luck, that was courage." She smiled at him in the darkness. "Maybe it was both, courage to try and luck to find you." They went inside together, closing the door against the night. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together, children's toys scattered in corners, books stacked on tables, photographs on the walls documenting birthdays and holidays and ordinary days made special by love. Wendy checked on each of their children, adjusting blankets and brushing hair from sleeping faces. Kyle sprawled across his bed, already nearly as tall as his father. Kenneth slept curled around a book he had been reading. Willow had kicked off all her covers and lay spread like a starfish. Winnie clutched a rag doll Wendy had made her. Kevin was peaceful in his cradle, though he would soon need a proper bed. 5 children. 5 miracles. 5 reasons to keep working, keep building, keep creating a world worth inheriting. In their own bedroom, Kellan and Wendy prepared for sleep. It was a familiar routine, comfortable and domestic. But when they finally lay down together, Kellan pulled her close and kissed her with the kind of passion that reminded her they were not just partners and parents, but lovers who still desired each other after 21 years. "I will never stop being grateful," he murmured against her hair. "For that night, for your courage, for every day since." "Neither will I," Wendy said. They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done thousands of times before and would do thousands of times more. The ranch slept around them, the animals safe in their pens and pastures, the land fertile and productive. Everything they had built, everything they had created, stood as testament to what was possible when courage met opportunity, when skill met need, when love found a way to flourish in the harsh beauty of the frontier. The story of how a housekeeper became a partner, how a dying mare led to a lasting love, how one woman's courage saved not just a herd but an entire future. That story would be told for generations. But the people who lived it, who woke each morning and chose each other again, who worked side by side through triumph and disaster, who built a life of meaning and purpose, they knew the story was not just about one dramatic night. It was about every day that came after, every choice to stay, every moment of partnership, every instance of respect and trust and love. That was the real story, and it was still being written with every sunrise that found them working together, every sunset that found them sitting side by side, every night that found them in each other's arms. The Wild West was slowly becoming less wild. Railroads crossed the prairie. Towns grew into cities. The frontier was closing, they said, becoming civilized. But here on the Xerxes Ranch, the essential truths remained unchanged. Hard work mattered. Skill and courage opened doors. Love, when it was real and deep and earned, could sustain a person through anything. Wendy Xerxes had arrived in Red Cloud with nothing and built an empire. Not through manipulation or luck alone, but through competence, determination, and the willingness to take risks when something needed doing. She had saved a foal and found a partnership. She had healed animals and built a reputation. She had loved a man and created a family. She had lived a life that mattered, that made a difference, that would echo down through generations. And when she was old and her children had children of their own, when the ranch had passed to the next generation, when she sat on the porch and looked out at the land she had helped build, she would remember that desperate spring night in 1884. She would remember the mare's panicked eyes, the feel of the foal's leg under her hands, the moment when its chest finally expanded with breath. She would remember Kellan's tears and his broken voice saying those words that had changed everything. "You saved my whole herd." She would remember and she would smile and she would know that she had done more than save a herd. She had saved herself. She had found her purpose. She had built a legacy, and she had loved deeply and truly for all the days of her life. That was the real story. Not just the crisis or the rescue, but the life that grew from it. The partnership that became love, the love that became family, the family that became legacy. All of it starting from a single moment of courage when a young woman stepped forward and said the words that would define her future. "I can do it," and she had. She had done it all.